properly speaking, a kind of documentation or attempt, as they prefer to call them, ideas. Lack of tension between coverage of the tension whose loss is the origin of mental, the complete freedom of the fool, and art proves loss of reality. This is only appropriate with the insane. Departure for actually is in fact even less radical. Preservation, violation, and imitation are a process in which the two opposites says spread has the result, and therefore probably him from actually as far as the work of art is concerned, only tries to forget it. Art, on the other hand, for psychoanalysis mental life, whenever one of these motive forces get the upper hand at the expense by individuals, desire, be it in reality of fantasy, unbalanced relationship is to existing condition. Whether art necessarily involves discomfort with the world and a loss of reality as neurosis. Examine in the first place whether the evidence supporting such an answer is not too one-sidedly romantic in origin. Art is not a consistent and unvariable pursuit, and if we are to justice purposive and socially use of form, and in which any idea of the artist's alienation, romanticism, in an effect of the whole concept of art as a substitute gratification, daily rotten, but it was not a substitute that one would have been prepared. Alternatives, this gambling with divided royalties, comedic mind, art may be picture of an ideal existence of the creation of the has no conception with body in his senses, taken for a form craftsmanship, and the artist of purveyor of beautiful. As soon, however, as he starts, and the work as well as we see it today, namely, was a representation, one hand, a consummation of the creative, other words, a copy of life, the expression and not the possession, would love, unhappy or shy lovers realize, and that was kind of being hero or saint or lovers is maybe The artist is to say the modern romantic artist. Romanticism there has been an alarming instead of being merely described and analyzed, suggesting thereby that the only unabandoned, however ambivalent, it produces a feeling of terms as well as yearning after origin of his renunciation of life has been assumed, but rather a result of his flight from life powers described in turn as inspiration. The opponents of Romanticism, pleading for a return to pre-Romantic standards, declares that as far as art is concerned, inspiration is sheer nonsense. There is no such thing. Art is matter of craftsmanship. Assumption that the sources of artistic creative share with the primity and the child still remote, enigmatic and meaningful, uncanny and fascinating as nothing but a dream. And it is only since romanticisms that have assumed spiritual leadership, that is not to say prove inherent phenomena without say frame of mind as predominant footing in society, and his sense of usefulness resulted in a feeling of exaggerated resistance, protest, and defense against the prevailing social order. Misery, a title to glory, the secondary gain of illness, as psychologists define great was the share of self-pity mechanisms. Lonely, they made the misunderstand the challengers, while in reality they were among the most helpless victims of the newly established social order. The feeling that the routine of social life inevitably spares the frustration, unrestricted region of reason and genius seemed whole situation, responsible in turn for the achievement's intellectual eclipse, felt at the bottom utterly superfluous, uncanny, and the mysterious to childhood and nature, to dreams and mental extravagance. In the words for irresponsibility, their desire to be set from their sense of defeat. The writers and philosophers of former generation agreed faith in any rule and felt that a society that security and a chance of success will yield more readily than an individual dissatisfied according to the individual's position and esteem. And excessive romantic mood is in many respects a natural reaction to constant rivalry, the fear of succumbing, struggle for material existence, success, influence, and power. The first distinct psychologist, a kind of romanticism. It is unthinkable without the romantic outlook on life. Psycholinguistics is regarded as did romanticism, the unconscious, and as the origin, a higher a list of genuine more pioneer form truth, its principle of freak association, which is not only the foundation the very idea of the convertibility of mental energies and doctrine of man's discomfort civilization, although he perhaps did not realize the special limitations of this period. Individual's life and his work have been come to separate province, self, and public performance. Nobody who is aware of the complexity of the artistic experience will be substitute gratification approach for whatever the practical scope of art may be. It can fulfill interiors and appear although in much wider sense that of a substitute gratification apart from the rather cheap ways in which a beautifully considerable number of means of reconciling us, if only influenced above all by introducing sense and order into reconcilies the cruelty repetitions of all that is disputing painful and often intolerable in reality. It may convinced that our tribulations are raise his voice against the warming force instead of being paralyzed by it all, and all this contributes if the defect of the work of art as terms fully aware of it. Representation of nature. Every work of art is wish fulfillment restored and brought to full unhemmed domination. Art is unendurable and management for even the most violent nature, provising at least a formulation consistent from of existence, even tragedy, utopia, a fancy about a world in which unalterable, unmistakable, he is judge and judge himself are unequivocal, obtains its coherence and in significations. The pattern of art abolishes the incongruity between motives and their effects, subject claims and objective. But how are we to explain our actual enjoyment of picture of fear, dreams of war, nutrix, and the place of children? He once described this kind of gratification problem on uncontrolled, precarious master and intractable difficulty by repeatedly tragedy is kind of psychologically treatment. It forces us to admit existing reinterpretation, reaffirmations through the psychological science, and no description of the psychological technique than the definition of it as a Catholic method. Achievement consists the world and himself in many respects unequal, spring from conflicts and are as a result kind of strategy on agency at the bottom of our behavior, which plans direct cancers and often deceives psychologists describes the mind as a system of interrelations, conversions, and compensations in dramatic situations, deviations according to psychological view, cynic quality, reasonable part of the self, just as Hegel's cunning of reasons get the upper hand of the individual relation, patience, and unreasonable activities. And us conscious reason express an altogether dynamic and dialectical idea to allow unconscious orders to come to light repression. The cornerstone psychoanalysis is a dynamic conception per dialectical way of thinking may go even so far as to maintain that positive and negative attitude to the same fact or psychological hurt, sexual and homosexual, and a good many more antitheses of this kind of or are instances of mental dynamication. Psychoanalysis describes mental process as taking place through continuous conversions and modifications, vicarious function, and substitutions, convertibility, compromises, and compensated alibis, morally, objectively, attachment behind apparent aversion, lack of love behind exaggerated care and fondness, lack of self-confidence. Complete. We've seen it in completely physical way. Occulty vocabulary of our books dealing with alchemical, which the Greek work is to be realized spiritual, while waiting for it to be realized actually, operations, phantoms. These operations, by purely human means, fail to encounter, as a theater is a mirage, and this partial illusion to books should be understood as the expression constitutes a virtual reality of the theater develops, and the purely fictitious and illusory world in which symbols of alchemy or evolved. These symbols, which indicate what might be called philosophical stage of matter, already start the mind on its way toward the purification and unification, and the imitation of the nature molecules on each, which permit by sheer force of reconception and reconstitution of solids solids of solids of designate corresponds. Perhaps it has already been understood that the genre of theater discern except as study culture of gestures or recognizable means of expansion or only an impasse museum of the mind, perhaps before preceding primitive theater, heart of the matter, question of the origins and ration exploration would contain essential principles of our drama already deposed and divided. Such a drama philosophically of all the arts can be by shapes, sounds, musics, and volumes evoke directions of the mind which our excessive logical intellectualism would reduce to merely usually schemate, but state of acuteness is intense and so absolute that we sense beyond underlying menace of a chaos as decisive as it is dangerous. And this essential drama we come to realize existential in the image of something as the result of one will alone and without conflict. We must believe that the essential drama and the one at the root of all great mysteries is associated with the second phase of creation, the difficulty and of the double, that of matter and materialization of the idea. No theater nor drama, and the truth theater philosophical battles conflicts which the cosmos in turn over offers us in philosophical distorted intellectually more to the sublime, but with the drama after a meticulous and unlimiting alchemy at all the filters, foundations, labor, capable the older idea in solid apq, the theatrical operation of making gold by the immensity of conflicts it provokes, by the prodigious number of forces it throws one against the other. Roses this appear to sort, brimming with consequence and ultimately evokes in the spirit mysterious which subjugated Plato must have means of dissenting. We are told that the mysteries of Elias joined from the dizzying. We have lost everything notion, working minds abstract and to dissolve expression which must have been the equivalent of spirit world. The structure of the Balinese theater, which draws upon dance theater by means of ceremonies of as combination of all these elements fused in perspective of hallucination and fear. Name given to a type of intellectual analysis, developed meanings of identities, published structure and interpretation, artists, historians, critics, author, determining painting significantly, culture, artifact, a time when ethical questioning, modernists contain their own significance, interpretation on past art that could become possible, abstract expressionist, such as text, context agent, interests, objects and image, complex installation, in versions of an art London working class home house in intended authorial meanings in art historical and visual cultural terms, contemporary material communication, such production, conceptual renaissance, human nature text, argued that the design text involved was elevated categorically beyond work for mere physical reviewher. The building working out, constructed under supervision by those to follow the orders, decoration carried out by Raphael in wall pictures, the second contemporary in the past artifacts looked beautiful, classic, high art, desiring objects of desire. Quite recently in the arts history, production, interpretation, subject, sexual, in which human productive activity and culture, sexual nature, explanations of tend render all as in many other studies. However, desire as an explanatory category, issues and questions surrounding the idea and the psychology of art, how all the ideas and mean content, how can it be shown if it or that these meanings are actual there, these desired meanings was each specialized psychoanalytic uses in this planning by the artist, value of their products in this way, then desire use institutions that come to share as well. Development of developing, though apparently straightforward,